First of all, I think precision medicine is the largest paradigm shift in medicine ever. And let me explain why. Because what happens is two things changing dramatically at the same time. On the one side, a complete novel class of information is meeting medicine, namely the molecular class. So everything on genes, on proteins, on metabolites. And that is a class scientifically known, but not yet in medicine, in day-to-day routine. And if you will, it is like a molecular X-ray that in future medicine will have, in addition to all the other ways of understanding diseases. And that molecular information is probably more prognostic and more predictive than anything else defining a disease and giving you support how to treat a disease. So that's the one thing. The other thing is, of course, digitalization, namely the complete transformation of basically all processes into a digital world. And these two things together, of course, in combination with everything else around, like imaging and so forth, that will lead to a medicine that not only changes the way a doctor is talking to and diagnosing and treating a patient, it will completely change reimbursement systems. It will completely change the way pharma develops drugs. It will completely change the way regulators regulate drugs and trials. It will change the way patients can inform themselves and are themselves educated on a disease and what to do. So it will change everything. If you think about where medicine comes from, it comes from a time when you could see the disease or the organ and then classified diseases according to organs. However, if you think precision medicine, the classification has very little to do with organs, if at all. It has only to do with the molecular profile of a situation, namely the variants or mutations, for example, that drive a certain disease. And whether this happens in lung or in breast or in liver is only important for the surgeon if he has to cut out something. But how to understand and treat a certain disease has very much to do with the molecular setup of that particular situation, so that I can imagine that drugs in the future are not so much related to an organ-related diagnosis, but more to a molecular profile. I mean, translation is all about translation. Why? Because many people have views on things, but the question is, how do you bring this into routine? And when I mean routine, I mean, how does a patient take advantage of this? Yeah? But also, how will payer reimbursement systems change? What is the new role of hospitals in this, for example? So I think the most important step in translation is that this new medicine truly happens in centers. Well, it could happen everywhere, but I think in the beginning it has to happen in centers that are equipped with the respective resources and trained people, trained doctors. Not many doctors are trained today to apply this kind of new medicine. So what happens now if you do that? If you do that, patients get, in addition to everything else, molecularly profiled, and that profile is becoming part of diagnosis and therapy support. So what you then do is you follow these patients longitudinally. That basically means you follow them over the time, and you look for outcomes, like you want to see, does it work, does it not work, how does it work, and then you adjust. And you again adjust according to the molecular profile, and you do that again. And in the best case, if you take oncology, which is probably the most prominent entity, the indication where it's used today, and if you compare that with AIDS 25 years ago, today people don't die of AIDS anymore. Why? Because you can molecularly profile the virus. Okay, man is a bit more complicated than AIDS, so this is why it takes a bit longer, but this is exactly what precision medicine allows, namely to molecularly profile a tumor, for example, or metastasis, or a disease, and then, so to say, according to that profile, adjust the therapy. But now comes the other side of that. By this, the hospital accumulates a lot of information on these patients, and not only on one, but on many. This is super, super important and valuable because pharma will not develop drugs in future anymore like in the past, namely, I make it up now, one arm randomly stratified for so to say the reference arm, and the other arm randomly stratified for the certain disease. In future, pharma will exactly know how a drug candidate works. Actually they do that today, and then will randomize according to patients who have a certain profile for that drug versus patients who have not a certain profile for that drug, which allows pharma to run much smaller trials, because then you can, with 10 patients each, you can see a difference. Where are these patients? They are in the hospitals, exactly in these hospitals where the translation is taking place. So these hospitals will become very important in the future of not only therapy, but also drug development as a place or resource, if you will, for having the information of such patients. And now the really, really interesting question is, who is owning the data, and who, if you use these data, who can take advantage of this? So my view is the patient owns the data. Yeah. So, but can a patient sell the data? So probably not. Probably he doesn't want to. But what I think, and there are other co-owners of the data. The hospital is a co-owner. Why? Because the hospital has a whole process around the patient. And the insurer is a co-owner because the insurer takes a financial risk for that patient. So you have the true owner of the data, who is a patient, and you have two economic co-owners, which is the hospital and the payer. And and who is interested on these information? It's pharma. So we will probably see a very novel way of how money flows. Namely, pharma will probably pay hospitals upon patient consent. Of course, patients need to consent for using such data or being able to address such patients for very precise, targeted developments of new therapeutics, which only knows winners, because if the patients get the best targeted therapeutic for a disease, the likelihood of success is higher than just getting a certain drug, a chemotherapeutic or whatever, that has been shown in the past that it somehow works, but as we all know, often does not work. Precision medicine happens in the hospital. So what you need that really works is a clear legal patient consent that allows you to apply this. It requires a data structuring of the information you gather on the longitudinal follow-up of the patients. And you need the hospital to talk to the payer to find the right way and model together with the patient to use such data and information, example given, for pharma. Basically, every disease has at least a molecular component, but a broken neck. And I heard people already saying that even this may be solvable. But what I want to say is, the more molecular a disease is, the more likely that precision medicine will be there. So oncology is accepted today. I think autoimmune is a natural thing. Inflammation is a natural topic. I think many CNS diseases, if not all, diabetes, metabolic diseases, certain cardiovascular, but all hereditary diseases, all. So, the question is not which disease and which not. At the end, it's going to be all diseases. The only question is where to start and where to end. And here, let's face reality. It goes where the money is. So look for the indications where the most money is in the game. And where's most money in the game, it is definitely oncology and CNS.